when the outlet, and I'll end with this, when the outlet was created, my son was about, 13 years old, and said to me, Mom, why are they building an outlet? Nobody goes shopping anymore. Everybody gets everything online. And he was right on it, and here we have a failed outlet, 12 years later, so yeah, we need to have more voices on this, and we need to have more vision and change the mindset of the planners to see that, if you build a community that people want to come to, they will come and it will be successful. You know what I mean? But if you're building something to make a buck tomorrow, then it's not going to work.
So Staten Islander News is here today with Farhana Husseini, Director of Programs and Climate Initiatives at Waterfront Alliance, and Kelly Villar, Founder and CEO, Staten Island Urban Center. So Farhana Husseini is the Director of Programs and Climate Initiatives at Waterfront Alliance. She has program and operational responsibility for climate resilience, environmental education, recreation, urban planning, conservation, sustainability, port, maritime industry, and integrated related program areas of the Waterfront Alliance. Prior to Waterfront Alliance, Farhana served on the leadership strategy team of Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation, or WCAPS, Climate Change Working Group, and worked in the Aga Khan Council for USA, leading the adolescent and young adult portfolio. She currently serves as the co-chair for WCAPS Climate Change Working Group, sits on the Green Marines North Atlantic Advisory Committee, and is a member of Climagration's Policy and Law and Learning, Programming, and Events work groups. Farhana comes to Waterfront Alliance with 14 years in nonprofit management, focusing on designing, developing, and leading portfolios supporting community and adolescent development in minority and marginalized communities. In addition, Farhana has 10 plus years of academic and professional experience as an engineer and consultant in the areas of electricity generation, renewable energy policy and markets, energy poverty, and climate change. Farhana has 2 beautiful children and would like to see them grow up in a more just and equitable world. Kelly Villar is founder and CEO of the Staten Island Urban Center. She has invested her life's work in helping people to hope, dream, and take action in their lives. She has always been passionate about helping others to be socially and economically conscious and to be activists in their own lives, thus living and sharing her mantra, community development through community involvement. Kelly has been active on Staten Island as a member of Community Board Number 1, chairing the Youth Committee and helping to move forward an agenda for North Shore youth to include finding new funds for programs such as the first Youth Build Staten Island program ever in the borough. In 2015, Kelly founded the Let's Rebuild Cromwell Community Coalition, dedicated to raising the community voice on youth recreation needs and common sense community development for the North Shore of Staten Island. She helped to lead the community in authoring a community-driven plan for development called MERC, the Maritime Education, Recreation, and Cultural Corridor of the North Shore. In 2020, Kelly produced Our Urban Town, Reimagining Staten Island's Waterfront Community, a short documentary chronicling the plight and hope for development on the waterfront. She is also a member of the NYC Waterfront Management Advisory Board. Kelly is vice chair of the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute, a multidisciplinary center for global Afro-descendant culture integrating arts, education, and social activism. For more than 20 years, Kelly's professional work has been in the financial field teaching economic empowerment. She holds a master's degree in science, urban policy, and planning from the New School for Social Research. So good morning. It's good to have you with us.
Good morning.
So what we're going to be talking about today is you guys had a North Shore walk about what you guys and the community wants to see for the development that's being planned by, I believe it was NYC EDC, right? The Economic Development Corporation is doing this. So kind of our discussion today is going to focus a little bit on what the community wants, what the community needs, and how we can help these the developers to kind of understand and maybe align with those kinds of things. So what locations are your organizations advocating for presently? Is there a specific boundary for the area, or is it all of the North Shore?
I'll let Kelly go first because I have a very small location, and I think Kelly is advocating for the entire waterfront.
Hi. So when we talk about the waterfront, thanks for talking with us. When we talk about the waterfront, the North Shore waterfront, we're specifically talking about everything from Rosebank to Stapleton to Tompkinsville to St. George, all the way to Snug Harbor. So because that is the epicenter of the most underdeveloped waterfront you can possibly, imagine, that has super potential in every corner of those communities. So we believe that there is such promise in that if all the stars aligned, and the stars are the political star, the financial star, the community stars, and the developer stars, and with a big emphasis on community and the voice of the community as it relates to that, because we're the ones that are going to have to live it and maintain it and advocate for it.
Right. Jump in really quickly to share a little bit about what Waterfront Alliance is focused on in sort of the North Shore. So there's a small piece of property, which is on Front Street, which is essentially 777, that's the address, it's 777 Front Street. And it is a place that has been utilized by community for a long time to do things like recreation and kayaking and fishing and really getting sort of access to the water. And one of the things that we've been trying to do with an organization called Kayak Staten Island, which uses this space for a kayak launch, is to actually sort of create a sustainable boat launch from this space. What we're sort of seeing is, I think to what Kelly is saying, there's so much potential here. And this is one of the last few places in New York City that actually has on-water access. And what we're really sort of concerned about is losing that kind of access. As a city of 520 miles of coastline, it is really important that we not lose our access to the water and to our waterfront.
Okay. And is there something like that they're trying to do with 777 Front Street to kind of limit or get rid of that access in some way?
With the, and Kelly knows a lot more about this than I do, but with the development that is happening in the North Shore revitalization plan, what we're seeing is that it's essentially a series of esplanades, and there's not necessarily a lot of good on-water access. And so what we've been sort of working on with New York City EDC, we've been talking to them quite a bit to try to ensure that there is some on-water access in some of their sort of development plans. And one of the things that we've gotten some support on from EDC is to actually look at the southernmost tip of their plan, which is 777 Front Street. And so what we're trying to do, and what we got a little bit of funding from New York State DEC, is to actually create a 90% to design plan that can create a boat launch as a part of the New York City EDC's revitalization plan. So hopefully we can have a space that is, ready for construction to actually have a boat launch for the community to use.
Okay, cool. And when you say like a boat launch, is that just like a slide that goes into the water, or is there more that's involved with that kind of thing?
It's a great question, and that's what we're trying to investigate right now. So we're talking to the community, getting a better sense of what they're looking for. So one of the things that we've been hearing is, it would be really nice to have a way to actually get into the water, because right now it's all, it's so underinvested, it's just crumbling, and it's a parking lot that's just little sort of pieces of rocks that are very dangerous to actually get into the water, and people are getting hurt. And so one of the things that what we wanted to do is we have a concept that we've been working on for the last 3 years, where it is essentially tying into what New York City EDC is planning to do, and creating sort of a sort of trail that goes into the water. But a lot of what we're hearing from the community is that they want spaces to actually store their kayaks, their boats. And so what we're also looking for is, potentially storage spaces as well.
Okay, that makes sense. So some kind of lockers or something like that to put their boats in. Okay, I have no idea how that concept would work, because like my family used to have a boat many years ago, and they had to rent the space in the marina, and they had a boat launch, and I don't know, I never was paying attention, so I don't know what they were doing, but I know that boats can take up a lot of space. Kayaks can take up a lot less space, because you can put it right on your the top of your car, so it doesn't take up that much space.
Exactly.
So, and what I also wanted to kind of ask, and I'm not sure if you guys would be able to answer this, is what is a park? Because I was always under the impression, which is mistaken, like it's the wrong impression, that a park is a place where they just let it go. Like they just once they built it, once they put the trees in and maybe they put some stuff in, they leave it alone. But that's not actually the case. Like in Clove Lakes Park, they just recently sprayed Roundup to control the poison ivy, which I don't know, it didn't do a very good job. It's already come back. So it's and they also, there's easements, and they cut into parks, and you would think that a park would be preserved. So if you guys would be able to just define like what the city of New York considers a park to be, and what you guys want to see a park be.
I don't know if I could describe what the city of New York describes as a park, and some, if you talk to Parks Department, it's, property that they're responsible for, period, whether it's a playground or there's different types of parks, activations and whatnot. I think a real good thing to look at is what kind of park we need on the waterfront. I think on the waterfront, one of the things that we've been advocating is a decarbonization of the waterfront. Being able to bring more green onto the waterfront, things like, there has not been one mention of a berm on the waterfront. And we're just only the borough that suffered the most out of Hurricane Sandy. And there has not been much talk about that, natural resiliency materials really help in terms of water absorption. One of the things that we recommended in our little short documentary, Our Urban Town, was that we produce or that we support the North Fields for a couple of reasons. One is that fields, of open space absorb tons of water. The other is that, and it would be a natural way to do it. The other is that children on the North Shore, which is considered by the state a DAC, which is a disadvantaged community, do not have enough play space in that regard. We don't have enough opportunities on the North Shore for young people to just run in a field, run on grass. I can't tell you how many young people who live on Staten Island on the North Shore have never played in a playground that has grass, So that's real important for us to do that. Not to mention that we would also really like to see more trees on the waterfront. Trees bring some oxygen into the area. We are a high asthma community. It also brings shade, and we're a community that has too many concrete parks, especially in the context of the fact that we're in a borough that they call the borough of parks. That's a real problem. So I think that we have to look at what kinds of parks we want in our space. I'll tell you one area where they, I think, made a poor mistake. One is at Irby. When they developed Irby on the waterfront, they called this the Waterfront Park. And it was a park that was designed to sit in front of the Irby property. And it was also, it's also labeled a public park. Unfortunately, the way that which it was designed, the entryway into that park, most people in the community do not know that it's public. It abuts a private looking parking lot that has guards, that has, and then it has, in the green spaces, it has small berm bumps on there. And I think that's what you call it. Farhana could correct me. But it has, so it's sort of like keep off the grass. And then there's just concrete and a fence that abuts the water line. So
they're missing the little leaf. They don't have the little leaf over there that says this is a park.
Yeah, I mean, or if it is there, I've never seen it, and most people don't know that it's a public area, so most people don't use it. It's inaccessible, so we have to talk about what kind of parks we want on the waterfront. That has to be a very serious conversation with the vision that the powers that be put forth, and that conversation hasn't really happened. People are kind of grabbing at the things that they're wanting to see on the waterfront, but there hasn't been a real sense of this is our vision, this is our plan, this is the purpose of our waterfront. This is, it's just none of that. It's just a lot of let's revamp things that we've already talked about for 10 years.
Right. Sure. And did you want to add anything?
I think Kelly covered it. I think that's absolutely right.
So if we could move on to, the next question that I had was, are there any specific plans that the organizers are looking to have implemented based on community input, or what you guys think would be the best for that area?
I think that, and Waterfront Alliance has been great in terms of helping us look at these issues with research to back it up, or with the science to back it up. So I appreciate that from them. One of the plans that we have put forth for the last 10 years now, almost 10 years, is the MERC, and the idea that we can create a vision for Staten Island's North Shore waterfront as a maritime education, recreation, and cultural corridor. And the reason that we say that is because we want something that's going to live forever and that's going to be supported forever. And New York City requires more people to come into the maritime industry. We need to start acting like a waterfront. Acting like a waterfront city, and we don't. Most of the people who are employed, from what we've learned, in New York's harbor don't even come from New York. So that's a darn shame. Here we have this beautiful waterfront, and we don't have qualified workers to work the waterfront, to work the harbor. So we feel that Staten Island is poised to support could be poised to support a maritime education center, much like Silicon Valley. We could be the maritime education valley. We have working, docs that do a lot of the backdrop kind of stuff, regarding working boats in New York City. That could be amplified. We have direct water access if we created, the route to the harbor school on Governor's Island. We have relationships right here with things like the National Lighthouse Museum. There are people on the island who have connections with who have been leaders in our community around the waterfront issues, who are educators, waterfront educators. Some of them even working over at the Maritime School in the Bronx. We could be an extension of that. You know what I mean? I think we have one of the few and maybe the only elementary schools that does waterfront education or, harbor education for children. That could be expounded and really thought out. We have, and let me say this, let me think. We have an empty Empire Outlet that has all this space and all this waterfront access that could easily become an educational institution, or at least parts of it. It's big enough to be an educational institution that supports that. We're also supporters of seeing that we create a space where young people and people in the community in general have access to swimming and learning how to swim. We just went through years of trying to develop a defunct Ferris wheel that never worked, a project that just, went down the toilet. However, they left us with a 250, parking lot garage, beautiful parking lot garage, and the footprint foundation to build a 60-story Ferris wheel. Why don't we make that a pool? Why don't we make that a maritime, a space where people learn how to swim? A space where maybe if we had an education institution that was doing maritime education, maybe that's where they could learn how to swim and do boating, et cetera, et cetera. Right there on the waterfront, near the Staten Island Ferry, near where all the action is going to happen. That would be beautiful. Recreation, how do we get, and that's, we were talking about kayak, getting people on the water, getting people to learn about water safety. We live on an island. We should know how to swim. Our major mode of transportation is a boat. So it's important. Unfortunately, we come from a space where, public swimming is very, very limited in Staten Island, with very few free learn how to swim slots from the city. And unfortunately, that affects, Black and brown and low income communities deeply because they don't know how to swim. The average kid that wants to learn how to swim on Staten Island has to pay their parents have to pay at least $600 to $1,000 just for them to learn how to swim. So, and those rates are from when my son was young. So he's 24 now. So I can imagine what it is. And it's a shame. And we have a college institution in our borough that does not offer a free access to its athletic facility like the other boroughs do. I don't know why that is, but it is. So that's all problematic. So yeah, this waterfront needs a vision. It needs for us to look at things more deeply and around. We've even talked about creating hydroponic farms along the waterfront. Also another resiliency measure that it's something that could get people in the community involved with and doing that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I could go on and on about the things that we want to do on the waterfront, but again, it needs those stars to be aligned in order for that kind of stuff to happen. And the other side of it is that the other major institution that is on the waterfront that I think is key is Fort Wadsworth, which is at the other end, which could be, it's an empty vessel of, a few Coast Guards, but the rest of the buildings are empty. It could be used for an education institution. There was talk at one point of making it a middle school or a maritime middle school. I'm not sure what happened to the plans. They just appeared and then they disappeared. And then, there was new political leadership, and I think that might have had something to do with it. But, it would have been, I think, a really good asset to the community.
Right.
Just love to add, I think Kelly hit on so many incredibly important points and couldn't agree more with everything that Kelly is saying. I think just to go a little bit deeper in one of the points that I think she was raising, this idea of the hydroponics lab for resilience. I think this idea of nature-based solutions is so incredibly important, especially for resilience, right? I think Kelly raised it earlier about this idea of, having more trees, having more sort of, coverage and tree canopy, and but also other nature-based solutions which allow for not only climate resilience, which, as Kelly sort of highlighted, the North Shore got hit really, really hard. And it is really incredibly important that we continue to make sure that there's resilience that's happening in particularly this neighborhood, because drainage issues are also an issue, right? Stormwater is becoming more and more of an issue. These are all things that have to happen along the waterfront, but also inland as well. And what this can also open up, and Kelly sort of alluded to this, is this idea of workforce development, right? So the maintenance and operations of nature-based solutions, which also can double as parks and green spaces, can also provide opportunities for the local community to actually be involved in, taking care of a lot of the of these pieces of land, which I think is it's a full circle, right? Like it's a wonderful opportunity for everyone who's living there.
Right, absolutely. Okay, 1 second. One question that I have is, you guys said, well, actually I have a bunch of questions about some of the stuff that you just said, but when you say hydroponic farms on the waterfront, that kind of brings an image to me, and it might bring a different image to our readers. So why would you do a hydroponic farm instead of like a regular farm, and how is a hydroponic farm different and suitable to this area? So what does that mean exactly?
I don't think that there's anything wrong with other kinds of farms. I think a hydroponic farm shows a way for us teaches us ways in which we can grow food without having all the resources that are needed. And I think that is also a way of growing stuff at a more rapid opportunities there for people. And if you check out, one of the places that we've looked at is Gotham Foods, which runs a hydroponic farm for the city of New York, and I don't think they're private, but they service the city. So we've been looking at their model and how we can possibly expand that one day. I think, even this recent scare of vegetables, being contaminated, I think if people we have to move as a society, I think, towards food sovereignty and learning how to do some things ourselves. And also to remind young people of the lessons about where food comes from, because, so many people think it's from McDonald's. I don't mean to be funny about that, but it's kind of true, so.
Right. And also you had said that other CUNY schools offer public access to their sports centers
Yeah.
in all the other boroughs.
Yeah. And so if you go to like Queens, for example, Queens has a pretty magnificent athletic center that is not only used for their students, but is also open to community.
Yeah, because I know when they, when they redid CSI, which was a while ago, like 20 years ago or so, back in, I think it was like 2002 or something, they were supposed to allow people to be able to sign up to play tennis. I don't know if any of the other things, maybe that just didn't end up happening. So it's not accessible to the public. I had always just assumed that they did that. And also for what you were saying about learning to swim, that's really important. And I know that there are swim classes going on this summer, but apparently none of them are in Staten Island. And our pools are all too shallow.
Right. Well, we don't have enough. I don't think any borough does, but the last I checked, I think we had less than 100 slots for free swim on Staten Island. I could be wrong about that number. Maybe it's changed, but even when my son was younger, there were 40 slots for the whole borough. So I don't foresee that having grown anymore. And it was only for the 2 months, for July and August. And we also have no public swimming pool like the other boroughs do. They are going to build out a public swimming pool, but it's kind of being done in partnership with Children's Aid Society. When Children's Aid Society does a magnificent job in this borough and helping, children and getting access to recreation. However, to have a public pool be absorbed by one organization is going to be not really a service to us. So we really need to get a real public pool that is run by the Parks Department that, everybody has access to, and it's, and it's big enough to service a whole borough.
Right. And so when you say like a real public pool, you mean like an Olympic style where there's like a deep end and a shallow end and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think people need to learn how to swim. If I were designing it, I would have a couple of different pools within one structured building. My fantasy is that we have this waterfront building that, it's pools that actually you can see the water while you're in the pool, and it's like this glass building, and it has several pools, for people who are more advanced swimmers, for lap swimmers, for senior citizens, and for children. I think there's enough space on our waterfront, especially around where the footprint of the wheel was supposed to be, for us to put something like that there. I think it would be phenomenal, for us to do that and be the swim, capital for New York City, like the place where people come to learn how to swim and compete and stuff like that.
Right. Because I know like the pool that's on the waterfront, I think that's Faber Park, is a very small kind of pool. They could just kind of revitalize that whole thing and make that into a real pool, I would assume. It seems like there's a bunch of space around it and stuff like that they could actually do that too. Fort Wadsworth doesn't do their educational programs anymore, I guess, because decades ago they used to have school kids come there and have like programs and stuff like that. But then at some point, I know they just kind of shut the whole thing up. They shut it all down and they stopped doing that. So I was never sure why. I don't know if there was ever an actual reason, or maybe they just didn't want to do that anymore. So what have residents or the community members expressed as the greatest need regarding the project that's being proposed by EDC right now?
They have a lot of, it depends on who you ask also. A lot of the people who are giving their concerns and voice to EDC on a regular basis are members of different civic organizations, and bless their heart, I think that civic organizations in Staten Island are powerful little groups. However, they don't necessarily include low income communities that really are the biggest victims of, development and environmental issues. They're usually not part of that conversation. So that's kind of where we come in, and we try to make sure we're having our ear to the ground and engaging people who are from these communities, including young people, including, their parents, to kind of voice their concerns about this stuff. It's kind of hard to look at this stuff sometimes when you are inundated with a bunch of other social justice issues that need to be addressed. So where a building is placed, or the fact that there's no swimming pool when you're worried about, maybe baby bottles and diaper, resources, you know what I mean? So
it's levels of
the only thing that I would, so that's the one thing that I would say in terms of like, who are the people that are informing EDC? By and large, they are the civic organizations that surround the waterfront. Your St. George Civic, your New Brighton Civic, and they all have great, great claims to bring to EDC. But I would just say, let's look at also what are some of the needs of the lower income people who may not be represented by these groups, to be represented in the planning of this waterfront.
Okay. So what do you guys see as the barriers that the residents face to having their voices heard and respected by the developers or by politicians or whoever is the decision makers in these kinds of situations?
I think it's, like I said, I mean, they're just not part of the people that are always asked, they're the people who are not asked, and are not organized. I think the biggest struggle that Staten Island has overall, if I'm going to look at the borough in terms of its issues relating to social justice issues, is that it doesn't have enough organizers. It doesn't have paid people who are paid to organize around different social justice issues the way other boroughs have. We don't have housing organizers. We don't have EJ people who are doing this stuff full time. Staten Island is made up of a bunch of volunteers. People who out of the goodness of their heart, and this is what makes Staten Island pretty cool, but people who out of the goodness of their heart after their 9 to 5 are showing up at meetings and volunteering. We have a volunteer culture around here, and that's good, but it's also bad because we're not giving enough resources to the issues that we're bringing up, and we just sound like a bunch of yelling people and complaining all the time about, being the forgotten borough and that kind of stuff. And we need to stop that. We need to hire organizers to help us with these issues.
Got it. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to illustrate something that Kelly is sort of sharing here, when EDC came in to sort of do community engagement around the what the community wanted for the North Shore Revitalization Plan, they went to the community board. And that was their way of engaging community. What we learned is Kayak Staten Island wasn't part of these conversations. There were other people that were not part of those conversations. And so on-water access was not something that was embedded into the design because, those conversations weren't had with everyone in the community. And that's just a small example of what Kelly is sort of sharing here is, not everyone is at the table that should be at the table. And engagement isn't happening, especially in some of these planning exercises, the way that they should be. And, fortunately, to Kelly's point, we have our eye on access and waterfront access. And so we were able to sort of insert ourselves, but not having actual 9 to 5 folks who are focused on all aspects of justice components. It really does make a a huge
A
difference.
lot of the rules are made for the developers' benefit. So, for example, there was a development that's like the nature center, right? So the nature center was made. I recently found out that the nature center was actually made without a permit. And all that they had to do was pay $200,000 to the city after they clear cut the whole area and started building it without permission. And they just paid the fine, and they're like, whatever, it's a tiny fine. Same thing with the Graniteville wetlands, where there was a lot of community pushback. And so they got the permit from the DEC and they clear cut the whole area, and they were like, oh, well, trees are gone. So it's kind of like, in that sense, a lot of times, and I know that a lot of the community boards tend to be dominated by real estate people and developer people. Or people who are interested in development, rather than being part of like a lot of community members that are lower income, that maybe they don't even know that the community board meetings are there and are happening for them. So what do you guys, have you guys met with, or are you meeting with the developers, and are the developers open to the changes that you guys are requesting? And have you met with elected officials to help with these issues?
We've been part of conversations with EDC directly, and we've also been part of conversations, and we're members of different civic organizations throughout the North Shore. So we've made a lot of our views known that way. In terms of elected officials, not really, other than participating maybe in one of their town halls if they had one, but it's not really, Staten Island for some reason, I think is pretty new to all this community input and development type of stuff. Historically, much of the development around Staten Island has been centered clearly around real estate. And their views on economic development have been, build a building, sign a lease, open a business, and that's economic development to them. And we have advocated for not only for us to begin rethinking that, but for us to begin thinking about the ecologists first, the people second, and then real estate. Because those are the things that are going to make whatever development comes about successful. If we, mess up our ecological system, everything else is going to fall apart. The people are going to fall apart. The real estate's going to fall apart. So we think that there needs to be a new view on that. Whether people have gotten the message yet, no, I don't know. I don't think that's happened yet, but we'll keep pushing.
Okay.
I do have to run. I'm so sorry.
Sure.
But I'll just quickly jump in and say that we've spoken to everybody about ensuring that there is access to water. And I'm going to keep harping on access to water again, because, there is so few spaces to actually have access to water. And in this neighborhood, it's never been more important to actually preserve it. And so one of the things that we've done is we've spoken to State Senator Jessica Scarlett-Banton, Council Member Camilla Hanks. We've talked to Maliatakis. Like we're talking to absolutely everybody and everyone, just to make sure that we preserve these spaces. Because I think, as Kelly is sort of saying, it is about ecology, embedding nature-based solutions to ensure climate resilience as much as we can, while also allowing for, access is really critically important. And we're trying to plant seeds wherever we can.
Sure, absolutely. And I just wanted to just make a recommendation for both of you guys. If you have not seen the Groundswell trilogy, it really kind of goes into a lot of detail about some of these issues. And one of the things I liked about the third one the best is that it talks about what's happened already. And it is very inspiring, because it's kind of becoming like a groundswell. Like it's just like around the country, people are like, oh, I can actually profit from my farm. Let me do that instead, rather than, because you have all the inputs and that costs all the money and it takes all the money out. whereas they found that just kind of turning that on its head has helped them to actually increase their profits. So Farhana, it was great to meet you, and I'm just going to finish up with Kelly then, if that's okay.
That sounds great. And
Thank
Kelly,
you,
great to see
Farhana.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So, does the North Shore presently have any undeveloped land that the community would want to keep as it is, possibly turning it into just a protected park?
You're talking about North Shore waterfront?
But yeah, this whole area, that anywhere within that whole North Shore that you were talking about before.
I think one area, I don't know, it protected park, but the spaces around the Lighthouse Museum, the pier is something that I know that people would like it to remain a pier. There's been talk about it not being a pier anymore or reducing the pier. It's one of the few places where you can actually walk out into the water and not only do catch and release fishing, but you could also really enjoy, the scene out there. I think Alice Austin House, of course, should definitely be a place that's protected. That is a magnificent facility, space that I think everybody in the country should come and see. It's just gorgeous. Fort Wadsworth is already protected because it is a federal, under federal jurisdiction. So I don't think anything ever will, they will never develop on there in any major way. I hope not. So yeah, those are spaces that I would say definitely need to be protected. I'd like to see them amplify the port, the waterfront space in front of Snug Harbor, so that there's connection between the park on the inland side of Richmond Terrace to the water side of Snug. There used to be a port there, or a pier that kind of has gone into disrepair. We'd love to see that revitalized, and there'd be some connection between the old sailors, area, of Snug Harbor, which that's what it was. It was a place where sailors lived, to the actual water. I think it could make a really good statement, and about maritime history, and maybe be connected to the Noble Maritime.
Okay. And what would your organization define as a success regarding this development, or for others planned for the future, or for the whole area if it was implemented? What would success in this advocacy effort look like to you guys once it finishes, like once they finish the making what they're making?
I think that I'm very hopeful always, even when things are not going our way. Here we are 10 years later, and Cromwell is being rebuilt as the Mary Callie Dalton Recreation Center. So that's a little sign of hope that things can happen if people raise their voices. I think, if we came out of this with a real vision for a waterfront, to me, that would be success, because then there would be people that would follow that and work towards that together. I think that keeping the voice of community on this waterfront, and all aspects of community, not just those who are, homeowners, and, I love homeowners. I'm a homeowner myself, but I think everybody needs to have a voice about the waterfront, and needs to have ownership of it, and a public space. I think that if we could change the mindset of the planners of Staten Island and help them see that something as simple as Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is not overdeveloped, it's not like super development there, is a very successful park, is a very successful waterfront, and hundreds of people go there. And without even trying, they have built up their economic development opportunities. So I think that we try so hard in this borough to like make money that we don't think out of the box, you know. When the outlet, and I'll end with this, when the outlet was created, my son was about, I don't know, 13 years old and said to me, Mom, why are they building an outlet? Nobody goes shopping anymore. Everybody gets everything online. And he was right on it, you know. And here we have a failed outlet, 12 years later, you know. So, yeah, we need to have more voices on this, and we need to have more vision and change the mindset of the planners to see that, if you build a community that people want to come to, they will come and it will be successful. You know what I mean? But if you're building something to make a buck tomorrow, then it's not going to work. You know,
Right.
That's just my personal view.
Right. And that makes sense. And actually, a lot of people have said the similar things. It's like if you just think about making money and in doing so, you kill all the species on the earth and you kill all the trees and then you can't grow food. Well, okay, you made that money and then, well, what are you going to do with it now?
What are you going to do now? Right.
So it was really great to meet with you and with Farhana as well. We really appreciate your taking the time to meet with us.
Staten Islander News is here today with Kathy Park-Price, Director of Advocacy and Policy at New Yorkers for Parks. Kathy Park-Price leads NY4P's advocacy and policy work to protect and expand New York City's essential open spaces, from neighborhood parks and playgrounds to greenways and open streets. A seasoned advocate for livable, sustainable cities, she has deep experience in grassroots organizing, coalition building, and policy strategy. Kathy is committed to a vision of public space that supports climate resilience, equity, community connection, and joy. Prior to joining NY4P, she served as the Brooklyn organizer at Transportation Alternatives, where she led local efforts to reclaim streets for people and supported citywide campaigns advancing safer, more accessible, and people-centered public spaces. So good morning, Kathy. It's good to have you with us.
Good morning, Heather. Thank you so much for the warm introduction, and I really appreciate that you mentioned joy. That is an important value of mine. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So I wanted to kind of start out with, how does your organization define a park?
So we advocate for parks and open space, and not only parks themselves, but the entire park system. So 14% of New York City's land is parkland, and so that can mean our beaches, there are marinas, there are greenways, our tree beds are part of the park system. So that also includes staff, the personnel who keep our parks clean, our lifeguards, our pools are part of the park system. So we advocate for the entire system, and as well as expanding and maintaining our open spaces as well. So that could include our plazas. It can include our POPs, or privately owned public spaces. It can include open streets. So there's it's really about people-centered design in our park system and open spaces.
Okay, awesome. So, what locations are the communities that your organizations are assisting, advocating presently, and is there a specific boundary for the area, or is it all of the North Shore?
So New Yorkers for Parks advocates citywide, and we focus our work with a parks equity lens. So we look at the areas that need the most support in terms of improving the park system, whether it's expanding and increasing park space, or the quality of the parks and open spaces, or also the access. So on the North Shore, there's an accessibility issue, as well as environmental issues, and while Staten Island is known to be the, I forget the phrase, the
Borough of
Borough
Parks.
of Parks, right, Borough of Parks, pretty simple and straightforward. There are pockets, and I'm sure you heard this from Kelly, but it's much more nuanced than that. And so when we looked at the North Shore and spoke to leaders on the ground, like community leaders, like Kelly, we wanted to delve into those issues and highlight them.
Okay. And are there any specific plans that the community and organizers are looking to have implemented with regard to what you guys were doing the walking tour about?
Mm-hmm. So when we did the walking tour, it was dozens of neighbors, advocates, community leaders, really representing a broad spectrum of folks from the community, whether it was a bid, the Staten Island Urban Center, Civic Association, Transportation Alternatives, even the Lighthouse Museum participated because of their location on the waterfront, Waterfront Alliance, the New York League of Conservation Voters. So it really ran the spectrum of local orgs that care about parks, open space, climate, and business, and livable cities, as well as citywide. And sorry, I forgot your question.
Sure. It was about the walking tour and what they were advocating for.
Right. So it was a broad, a broad range of partners and a broad range of issues. Many of the common threads included across the orgs included the resilience component, given the North Shore's the impact of climate on Staten Island, especially the waterfront being the front line. And so resilience, development, having a holistic picture and plan to improve accessibility while prioritizing resilience and giving housing the importance, the prioritizing housing, but within the context of climate resilience and recognizing the location where this development is happening.
Right. And what have residents expressed as the greatest need regarding either there was a project of construction that they're doing, that they're planning for the North Shore that you guys were discussing, or just in general that waterfront area? What do the residents want the most?
Yeah, I would like to leave it to Kelly to speak for the community, but I will say, as someone who wasn't familiar with the nuances of the waterfront, it was really, and someone who lives in Brooklyn, it was really eye-opening to hear about the issues from people like Kelly and the St. George Civic Association, people who have really been making improvements and advocating for change in the community, to see how connectivity, how some of the past projects, some of the broken promises, how it all kind of ties together. And then when we were walking, we're right on the water technically, but there was such limited access to it. So you're surrounded by water, but you can't enjoy it. You can't. It's not. It hasn't been prioritized. And even coming off the Staten Island ferry, you see how the design is the design around the terminal and the general area is really prioritizes drivers when there is so much potential to make it much more walkable, feel safer, and more vibrant. So some of those things really came out through the experience of walking together with people who really know the area.
Okay. And what do you feel are the barriers that residents face to having their voices heard and respected?
So on Staten Island, I think it's similar to other areas of the city and probably anywhere you neighbors are disrupted or want to see change. The status quo is strong. So streets designed for people and kind of streets designed for cars as an example, that is something that is kind of entrenched in our city, and that has been changing a lot in especially with the new administration and the desire to create streets that are the envy of the world and prioritizing bus lanes, for example. The mayor brought back many streets improvement projects that Mayor Eric Adams delayed or did not implement. So, but that political will, challenging the elected officials, holding them accountable, getting them on board, I think is one of the biggest challenges.
Okay. And where have previous developments along the waterfront and elsewhere in the community failed or succeeded as far as what the community needs and wants?
I can't speak to specific projects off the top of my head, but there is a theme across the city where we are seeing some successes and also works in progress. I think about Bushwick Inlet Park and Monitor Point in North Brooklyn, where a park, Bushwick Inlet Park, 25 years ago, that the park was promised to the people of North Brooklyn in exchange for all the development that has happened there. And now, I think only 5 acres of the park have been opened, and that's 25 years later. So the prioritizing housing and doing it with the development and creation of parks and open space and investment and maintenance of existing parks and open space really need to go hand in hand with development. So in Greenpoint, in Williamsburg, Monitor Point, and Bushwick Inlet Park are an example. Long Island City with the rezoning and the waterfront connectivity opportunities with Hunters Point Parks Conservancy is leading some efforts there in Long Island City. I think about some of the success in the Lower Manhattan waterfront, the resiliency project in Lower Manhattan. So many opportunities for New York City to become a model of waterfront resilience and holistic development of housing as well as parks and open space and transportation, the whole ecosystem.
Okay. And there was a specific development that you guys were talking about while you were walking the North Shore, and I was just wanting to know if the organizations or the residents have met with the developers, and are the developers open to the changes that they were looking for, which I think was like more sustainable, the building to be more sustainable, to be more inclusive and open and include like open spaces and stuff. But do you find that the developers are open to meeting with the residents of the community and taking their concerns in mind?
I couldn't speak to this, the specifics of this community. Yeah, I think Kelly would be the best rep for that.
Okay. And does the North Shore presently have any undeveloped land that residents are looking to keep as it is, possibly turning it into a protected park, or is that something like that they're happy with the amount of open space that they have?
Again, I would leave it to Kelly to to respond to that.
Okay. And what would your organization define as a success regarding your advocacy in this community? What would you see as, as successful like developments that take into account the community's input?
Sure. Definitely all of our efforts at New Yorkers for Parks kind of leads to more investment in our parks. So the fund, we can't improve the parks system or, address the resiliency needs and issues without funding. So I guess that would be step one in terms of defining success, and also the holistic approach to the waterfront, taking into account the climate picture and future, as well as accessibility, connectivity, prioritizing housing, but not doing any of one thing in a vacuum. So we can't have housing without also addressing parks and open space needs. We also can't do it without transportation and safe street design. So having a master plan and working across sectors, so across agencies, and working with the community to envision a future that incorporates all of the needs. You're never going to satisfy everyone, but having a holistic approach, I think, is really important.
Okay, awesome. And I wanted to ask a little bit about the two of the new charter questions that would be relevant to parks in New York City, because it's kind of difficult to understand what they mean in practical terms. And I think it's the case, I might be wrong, that city property includes parks, and public space can be parks or community spaces in some instances. So the first ballot question says they want to speed up the process for granting a revocable consent to use public space and simplify the process to use public space for uses such as ramps, planters, and cafes by removing mandatory hearings and council disapproval of sidewalk cafes while maintaining community and council input, but it doesn't really say how it maintains that input. So I'm wondering if that would be something that would kind of be like that your organizations would support, or that you would say you need to maybe think about that a little bit.
Right. We're also just learning about the nuances and the language, but I do think generally it seems possible to support our parks, and it does include, we believe it includes parks. Hopefully, just as this helps us build housing, it can clear the backlog of parks capital projects. Our org has pushed for capital process reform, so we generally see it as a positive. Right.
And then the other question is about speeding up street safety projects, disposition of unused city property, which doesn't really, I don't know what that means exactly, and like simplifying the review of street safety projects to reduce construction timelines, fast track disposition of unused city property with approval from the City Planning Commission, and expedite leasing offices used for city workforce. So it seems like they're trying to cut red tape, but in that sense, red tape could also refer to community boards and city council input as well. So I know like a lot of the politicians have been, at least on Staten Island, have been saying that actually reduces community input, which would seem to be something that organizations such as yours would not want to support taking away what little community voice there actually is.
I think we would need to study this specific language to understand it, because, of course, yes, we do want to. New Yorkers for Parks has advocated for improving, cutting red tape. It's one of the pillars of our Parks 2030 platform. In terms of the city council and neighbor input, I haven't seen it language directly about that issue, but I do think there are street safety projects where you wouldn't ask for community input on building a new firehouse. You would just do it because it's necessary. There are many of the street safety projects I think should be implemented, and maybe they should be fine-tuned with community input, but whether they should exist should be determined by the need, the infrastructure, what we're prioritizing as a city. So if we're prioritizing safety, we can't also prioritize the speed of vehicles at the same time. They're in conflict. So sometimes I do think it's necessary for the city or our leaders to be decisive about what is being prioritized and say this street safety redesign needs to be implemented because it is beneficial and for the greater good. And also, street safety projects are related to parks and open space in that connectivity, safe access to and around and in our parks and open spaces is a parks advocacy issue. And so it is definitely tied to our work.
Okay, that makes sense. Because, what I was thinking when I had seen that is, first of all, I don't know if there's more to it, if it's just this specific language.
And I haven't studied it.
Right. Because, it's like a very legalistic kind of thing. But it does seem that you would want more community input, maybe not city council-wise, but maybe, push it more towards community boards or having public meetings or something like that, where the community can say, yes, we need this, or no, we don't need this, and then their voices can actually be heard. I know, in a lot of instances, there are other cities and states that are way worse, they just don't care what the people think at all. But at least in New York City, we do have a process for where residents can express their concerns, and sometimes their concerns are taken into consideration and sometimes they're not. But in that sense, I know on Staten Island, the community wants to have a lot of input into these things. They don't think that they need 1 million bike lanes, and they don't think that they need as many bus lanes. But then when they make the bus lanes, the buses get places faster. So it's kind of I guess in that sense, the double-edged sword here on Staten Island, where everyone has to have a car. And I know in other boroughs it's not like that. We're in Brooklyn, or in the Bronx or Queens, you could legitimately not own a car. I know people who do. They don't own a car. In Staten Island,
I don't own a car. I don't want a car. I'm happily car-free.
But on Staten Island, if you want to spend the rest of your life in a bus, then don't get a car. But because we don't have trains, we have one train that really just, I'm sure you're familiar with that.
One line, yeah.
The one line, one side of Staten Island has a train, that's it. If you're not on that one side of Staten Island, you don't get a train. So I think when we talked to the Port Richmond Alliance, they were telling us that there are a lot of commuters, and this actually bore out in the research. Staten Island has a 2-hour commute, sometimes 2.5 hours to get to Manhattan by public transportation. So it's not really a doable thing at this point, and they never really prioritized that with Staten Island because Staten Island wanted to stay rural. But by staying rural, that also means that you're not really connected to the other parts of the city as well. So it's kind of like that, you know, there's positives and negatives for all of those things. So was there anything else that you wanted to add today about either the advocacy work that your organization is doing or what you guys want to see as a vision for the future of Staten Island?
I think I covered it. Sorry, I had.
I hope you have a really good day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks for
so much.
covering.
No
Appreciate
problem. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi. I just want to, I know my back is to you, but on behalf of Senator Jessica Scarcella-Spanton, I want to thank New York Parks and all of its partners because I don't have that full list in front of me. So please excuse me if I don't have that list, but thank you to all of those who have partnered with New York Parks for this occasional event and for this walk. It means a lot. All of today's partners in organizing organizers for this event, we are thankful for your contribution to advocacy and on behalf of Staten Island's public spaces. As we walk the North Shore today, we're not just looking at parks and open spaces, we're looking at places that bring people together, connect us to our waterfront, and strengthen our neighborhoods. The North Shore is full of opportunity, and conversations like today help ensure that the community's voices remain at the center of the future investments and improvements. By working together, we continue creating public spaces that are accessible, welcoming, and vibrant to all who live, work, and visit here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your partnership, and I hope everybody enjoys.
Thank you for being here today. You know, we are very excited about the attention that our waterfront is receiving right now. We believe in its potential. It has a lot of potential. And just the right people are here. I'm so excited about that, to speak about these issues. You know, everybody from, you know, not only our organization, you know, but also the St. George Civic and all the smart people there. Makerspace has been out there doing it over and over again. Health for Youth. I mean, over and over again, all these different terrific organizations are coming together to do this work. I'm hoping for a couple of things while we do this walk. One is that we not only look at its potential, two, that we look at and discuss or highlight some of the mistakes that have been made, and also come up with solutions, because it's easy to have a pity party, but it's a lot harder and a lot more important, I think, for us to have a forward discussion about what's going to happen on our waterfront, what we need to happen. We have a new administration in place right now in the city, and they need to hear our voice very clearly about what we need in our waterfront. And I'll just say, from our perspective, it is that we need, first of all, need to kick out the narrative that Staten Island is, yes, we are a borough of parks, but we're a borough of parks that has a lot of different needs. And just saying that we're a borough of parks doesn't mean that we don't need it. We're also a borough of parks with a lot of bald spots where low income and brown and black people live. And also people who are right here on the most beautiful, what could be the most beautiful waterfront in New York City. As you can see, not a tree in sight. So it's really important for us to highlight these mistakes and hopefully gather momentum within the administration and others to start making the rights for the wrong stuff that's been done here. Because this place is too beautiful to walk away from. We really need to get the resources in here to correct that. So I appreciate everybody that's here, and I'm looking forward to our walk, everybody.
All right, perfect, thank you. All right, so we're all gathered here today because we understand that our parks are in large needs of support, right? Especially here on the North Shore, where we have the beautiful North Shore Esplanade, that sadly has not been receiving the support that it's needed for years. Where we're looking at Tompkinsville Park, which Parks Department has been a great partner to us, but of course that park always needs more support. As much progress as has been made, there's still so much more that can be made to turn that park into the town square that it rightfully deserves to be. And also just to further support the kind of community-centered development that we have been begging for years along our waterfront, the kind that invites people not just to spend money here, but to spend their time here, to build relationships here, and to make this a cornerstone of our community and of the memories and the relationships that we form together here. Right now, those things aren't happening because our parks are just not receiving the support. There's just not people with the right vision, the vision that we all share for our parks. And so we need to bring that vision to our elected officials, to our people in power, so that we can get that support, get that funding, and most importantly, bring that vision that people don't see in Staten Island, bring that vision to the people who can make it happen. So I'm really glad that everybody's here today so that we can all join together in bringing that vision of a beautiful parks for Staten Island to our city government. Thank you.
Classroom voice. Oh, hi, hey, how you going? I'm good. So I just want to say a few words. Actually, just wanted to start with a huge thank you to New Yorkers for Parks. This is an organization that has its roots in 1908 work. Hello, 1908 work here in New York City. The way I often think about them is the Daffodil Project. This is a beautiful program that has come out of our remembrance of 9/11, which we should always remember. And I just want to give a huge shout out to this organization. They've been doing the tough, hard work for over 100 years to make sure that New Yorkers have the beautiful, vibrant parks that they deserve. To that end, a lot of the work that we do at Health for Youth incorporates things like the Daffodil Project and projects known as It's My Park Days. I implore everybody to get out there in a park. Parks allows you to do It's My Park Days. They are free. We've been doing an It's My Park Day for 14 years, starting with the North Shore Esplanade and then going into several other parks, including New Brighton Cottages Hills, Corporal Thompson, Lieutenant Leah. I could go on. But they're wonderful projects. Get out there, get into your parks. And also, the reason why something like this is so important is because it allows young people to be able to experience their parks in a dynamic, creative way. We just had a young person who's going for his Eagle Scout create and build a rainwater system for the park that we would never been able to do. He did it himself. Did it, created it, organized it, got the volunteers there. It took about 9 hours, but it got done. So these kind of initiatives really get young people invigorated and into it. And I just again want to thank New York for Park. I want to thank Staten Island Urban Center. I want to thank all of you for coming out here. And let's have a great day, a great walk, and really celebrate parks and what.
Hi, thanks so much, Kathy, and thanks New Yorkers for Parks. So I actually started my career at the Parks Department, and we called Staten Island the greenest borough. But you don't see that here on the North Shore, right? I think that's what Kelly talked about. Putting on my Waterfront Alliance hat, literally and figuratively, you could also call Staten Island the bluest borough, right? There's lots of waterfront to see, but very few places and almost no places on the North Shore where you can actually get into the water, right? And so that's what we're here to change. Waterfront Alliance has been advocating and creating for 20 years public access, and that's true public access to the waterfront citywide. Because we know that access is not a luxury, it is essential. It supports people's health and happiness. It supports local economies and downtown business districts. And it creates that connection for people who can, once you get in the water, you understand it, you care for it, and you know how to live with it, which is increasingly important. So in 2022, we surveyed 60 sites citywide that we thought were prime for public access development in some way, shape, or form. And 777 Front Street, which we're going to talk about today, bubbled to the top for many reasons. One reason is because it was already being used, right? Some of you may have kayaked down there with Kayak Staten Island. Unfortunately, it might not have been legal or the safest way to do it, and that's exactly what we're here to change. So fortunately, we've got a grant from DEC. We got, after some teeth gnashing, some support from EDC, and a great partner with Kayak Staten Island, and we're going to be working together with design partners and some public investment to really codify and formalize 777 Front Street as a true public access point, and that's a model that we're hoping to replicate citywide. So I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you.
Hey everyone, how are you feeling this morning? It's great to see you all today. I know I've heard a lot of people talk about how the North Shore of Staten Island doesn't have enough parks and enough green spaces, and that's true. But the fact is that we do have parks here. Parks that community members, like many of whom I see today, care about very deeply. And so even if we have fewer parks on the North Shore, that's all the more reason to care for them more. However, caring for the parks themselves is only one part of the battle. If you can't get to your park safely, if you can't walk from your home down to the park that's maybe only a few blocks away without feeling that maybe your child is in danger, or that it's not safe enough for you and your family, then that's another problem that we need to address. And so at Transportation Alternatives, we want to make sure that one, of course we also love our city parks, but we want to make sure they're safe and accessible to get to, as well as enjoy.
All right, so I am here really just to listen and learn about what's happening on the North Shore. And also I want to highlight some of the programs that we have at City Parks Foundation, because we do provide free programming and resources to communities around the city, right, including Staten Island. So upcoming, we have the NYC Green Fund the application starts July 8th, and we provide funding support for $1,000 all the way up to $40,000 for groups with budgets under $175,000. So that's 0 to 175, right? It supports a variety of programming, stewardship, youth development, health and wellness, and organizational development. We also have upcoming August 8th and 9th Summer Stage at the South Meadow at Snug Harbor. It's awesome. I've been to the last few at Staten Waterfront and I've truly enjoyed myself, so I hope to see you out there. We also have the Puppet Mobile. We're doing Pinocchio and Geppetto's Big Apple Adventure. We provide sports programming and also educational programming, specifically Seeds to Trees, which introduces students to urban ecology, nature, and NYC parks through classroom activities. If you want to learn more about it, I have flyers for all of these things that I'm talking about today. And I'm just excited to be out here with you all, and I'm ready to walk and get my 10,000 steps in.
All of you for helping make this happen and being here. I'm Sophia Barandiran, and I'm here representing both the East Coast Greenway Alliance and the New York City Greenways Coalition. And we're here today because we believe that Staten Islanders and North Shore residents deserve a green, accessible, and resilient waterfront. The route that we're going to walk today is part of the future North Shore Waterfront Greenway, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about today. This greenway will someday connect all of these parks that we're talking about and connect communities. Connect communities all the way from the Goethals Bridge to the Verrazano Bridge. And we envision this greenway as a ribbon of green and of happiness and of community space that will provide access to the waterfront, increase climate resilience, and create space for people to gather, rest, and be together here on the North Shore. The route will also have connections to the 3,000-mile East Coast Greenway, which spans from Maine to Florida, giving Staten Islanders access to destinations for recreation across the region. So the city is beginning the process for planning this greenway very soon, later this year. So I ask you all, as you walk this route today, take a moment to imagine what you want it to look like, because it's really for us to help shape what this greenway is going to be. How do you want to use the greenway? Who do you want to use it with? Where do you want it to connect, and what do you want it to feel like? I think together we can imagine a waterfront that really works for all of North Shore residents and Staten Islanders.